officially opened the conference. singing. Let us stop singing so that we should get on with the tasks that our members have given us to come to this conference and represent them. I want to appeal even to those members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, the leadership of the Women's League, the Youth League, the Veterans League, and MK Liberation War Veterans, leadership of the Alliance partners, as in the SACP, COSATU, leaders of liberation movements who have come all the way from a number of countries in our region, traditional leaders, religious leaders, business leaders, excellencies, ambassadors and high commissioners, distinguished international guests, representatives of the media, delegates, and comrades, I wish to appeal to all of us. This meeting is a hallowed meeting of the African National Congress. And I want to appeal to all of us to respect this meeting that has taken place 55 times in the life of our organization. I want to appeal to everyone who wants to raise their dissatisfaction to do so in an orderly manner, in the way that we do things here in the African National Congress. We've been in existence for 110 years, and this is not the time to come and display this type of disorderly behavior in the presence of international guests and as our nation is watching what is happening here. Comrades, this does not behove well for the African National Congress. On behalf of the National Executive Committee, I would like to extend a very warm word of welcome to all delegates present here, as well as our observers and guests for your attendance to this 55th National Conference of the African National Congress. A special word of welcome to representatives of fellow liberation movements and sister parties who honor us through their presence here, and in doing so, demonstrating their solidarity and friendship with us. This opening session of the 55th National Conference is taking place, comrades, on a day that occupies a special place in the hearts and the minds of our people. It was on this day, 61 years ago, that Umkhonto Caesar, the People's Army, was formed, marking a new era in the struggle for liberation. Today, as we gather to take forward the struggle for emancipation of all South Africans from all forms of oppression, we honor the courage and the sacrifice of all those who served within the ranks of Umkhonto Caesar. We commend the veterans of MK who have formed a unified association called the MK Liberation War Veterans to take forward the legacy and the memory of the People's Army. We applaud you for finally having found a way to unite those organizations. Comrades, we cannot observe this day without paying tribute to the memory of the Chief of Staff of MK, Comrade Chris Hani. And express disappointment that his killer has been released on parole. Our thoughts are with Comrade Chris Hani's family, Maddie Hani and the children, as well as his party, to which he was General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. As they try to make sense of all this and deal with it, Chris Hani, comrade, was a great son of the soil and was among the most admired, the most beloved, without a doubt, the most extraordinary of our revolutionary movement.
Security and Sunday security, please come here. Continue, President. Security, come.
Comrades, let us in recognition and commemoration of this moment stand and observe a moment of silence as we remember those who sacrificed their lives in our struggle, and as we remember Chris Hani. Let us observe a moment of silence. Thank you, comrades. Thank you, we may be seated. Comrades, as a democratic nation, we mark this day, the 16th of December, as Reconciliation Day. On this day, we gather as one people, as South Africans, to reaffirm our shared commitment to heal the divisions of the past, to end inequality, and to ensure that all may enjoy equal rights and opportunities. As the African National Congress, this day reminds us of our historic mission to unite the people of South Africa and to give effect to the desire of those brave men and women in Umkhonto weSizwe who fought for the happiness and the freedom of the people of South Africa. So, comrades, I am honored to stand before you to present this political report in compliance with Rule 16.1.2 of the ANC Constitution, which states the President of the African National Congress shall present to National Conference and the National General Council a comprehensive statement on the state of the nation and the political situation generally. In this regard, the report must reflect on what the ANC has done to implement the decisions that it took in the last conference. This report takes, comrades, as its starting point the vision and the mission of the African National Congress, which is set out in the aims and objectives contained in the Constitution of the ANC, which include, among other things, that the ANC shall unite all the people of South Africa, Africans in particular, for the complete liberation of the country from all forms of discrimination and national oppression, to end apartheid in all its forms and transform South Africa as rapidly as possible into a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic country based on the principles of the Freedom Charter and in pursuit of the national democratic revolution. To defend the democratic gains of the people and to advance towards a society in which the government is freely chosen by the people according to the principles of universal suffrage on a common voters' roll. To fight for social justice and to eliminate the vast inequalities created by apartheid and the system of national oppression. To build a South African nation with a common patriotism and loyalty in which the cultural, linguistic, and religious diversity of the people of South Africa is recognized. To promote economic development for the benefit of all, to support and advance the cause of women's emancipation, to support and advance the cause of national liberation, development, world peace, disarmament, and environmentally sustainable development, and to support and promote the struggle for the rights of children and the disabled. Comrades, these are the aims and objectives that necessarily frame the ANC's vision and mission, but they also provide us with the tools of analysis of the state of the South African nation. This also informs our assessment of the progress made over the last 5 years in advancing the national democratic revolution. This 55th National Conference is indeed a watershed moment for the African National Congress. The theme of our conference is defend and advance the gains of freedom, unity through renewal. This theme calls upon all of us as delegates to this conference to pursue with greater vigor the rebuilding and renewal of the ANC, and as a united movement to advance the fundamental transformation of our economy and our society. The decisions we will take here will determine the future of our movement and, to a large extent, the direction that our country will take in years to come. We go into the 55th National Conference as an organization that is renewing and rebuilding itself. We have a new membership system as directed by the 54th National Conference to combat gatekeeping and the manipulation of our democratic process. More than 3,500 branches of our movement held the most democratic processes through the branch general meetings to discuss policies, to select delegates to this conference, and also to nominate their preferred leaders. These are major steps that have taken place in renewing our organization and ensuring principled unity. This 55th conference takes place at a time when the movement and the country are facing enormous challenges. Members of the ANC who selected all of us as delegates to represent them here expect us to demonstrate the necessary political consciousness and resolve to confront and overcome the challenges that our people face. Those members who sent us here to this conference are aware that the ANC has traversed a remarkable journey since it was founded 110 years ago. They know that their glorious movement has dedicated itself to achieving a better life for the people of South Africa. Our role as an organization is unparalleled in its importance and in the history of our country as well. Our mission is a glorious one beyond compare. It is imperative that we should never forget our original founding mission as an organization. Our members and the people of South Africa expect us to be committed to our responsibility to execute our founding mission as an organization. They also expect us to have the courage and the honesty to recognize our shortcomings and the resolve to correct them. They harbor in their hearts the hope that the African National Congress will emerge from this conference with clear and cogent solutions to the challenges that they as the people of South Africa face and that our country faces. The resilience of the ANC, as well as its enduring support among the majority of South Africans, has continued to demonstrate the important role that it plays in South African society. We have nevertheless been hampered in our efforts to further strengthen the work of the ANC and its impact, as well as to renew the state and improve the lives of our people in the way that we have intended. Objective and subjective factors such as the devastating COVID pandemic, the public unrest that we went through, the floods and the geopolitical upheavals, as well as other challenges in our movement and government, have held us back from serving our people at the best of our ability. Yet, as we shall elaborate later, there is much we have been able to do to address these challenges. We were able to embark on interventions that enabled us to confront the pandemic. We introduced economic and social measures that helped minimize the impact of the virus. We also initiated a variety of measures that have put the economy on a higher trajectory of growth and development. Despite the time lags in putting the economy on a firm footing of sustained growth, the setbacks of failing electricity generation and other weaknesses in infrastructure, we see some green shoots starting to sprout. I do believe that better days do lie ahead. Comrades, since we last gathered here in 2017 at the 54th conference, our movement has had to bid farewell to several stalwarts, leaders and cadres of our movement. Senior members of our movement who passed away during this time include our departed and beloved Deputy Secretary General, Comrade Yasmin J.C. Duarte, whom we remember fondly. We also remember Isitwala Andwe, Comrade John Nkalibeng, isithwalandwe Comrade Andrew Mlangeni, isithwalandwe Comrade Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, former ANC Treasurer General Comrade Mandy Msima, an NEC member Comrade Edna Molewa, Comrade Bavelile Songwa, Comrade Jackson Mtembu, Comrade Tlengiwe Mkize. We also remember veterans such as Rashaka Rachitanga, Johnny Aronson, Petros Mashishi, and Comrade Matiba, who died recently. Many other comrades who made an outstanding contribution to our struggle and to the cause of our people also passed away, some of whom we lost due to COVID. We pay tribute to these gallant freedom fighters who served our movement with diligence. To honor their lives and contribution, we must pick up the spear where it has fallen, to continue the struggle to which they dedicated their lives. I would like now to speak about, yes, the state of our nation and the progress that we have made in advancing the National Democratic Revolution. In the strategy and tactics document that we adopted at the 54th National Conference, we state that the National Democratic Revolution, the NDR, should strive to realize shared prosperity, social justice, and human solidarity. We state that this should be premised on a united state based on the will of all the people without regard to race, sex, belief, language, ethnicity, or geographic region. We continue to state that it should be based on a dignified and improving quality of life amongst all the people by providing equal rights and opportunities to all South Africans. And also the restoration of the birthright of all South Africans regarding access to land and other resources. When assessing progress in the execution of the NDR, we therefore need to consider how the current state of our nation reveals the extent to which these goals have been and are being realized. In the state of our nation, must in the first instance be measured by the quality of life of the people of South Africa, especially the poor and the working class. We need to ask ourselves, how far has the ANC gone in creating a better life for all South Africans? In reflecting on the circumstances of the people of South Africa today, we recognize the substantial and meaningful progress that has been made in improving the quality of their lives since the advent of democracy. Many of our people are feeling the brunt of ever-rising living costs in the form of food prices, fuel prices, continuous rising prices in transport. The levels of poverty continue to give rise to a sense of hopelessness amongst our people. But we also recognize that there are areas where progress has stalled, and some areas where our achievements have been eroded. There are several reasons for this, including slow economic growth over more than a decade and the effects of the pandemic. weaknesses in governance and service delivery, especially at local level, have contributed to crumbling infrastructure and failing services. Corruption and mismanagement have meant that resources meant for the poor have been diverted. This task to restore the positive trajectory of social and economic development must be central to the work of the ANC at this time and must be at the forefront of deliberations at this 55th National Conference. The triple challenge that our people face in the form of poverty, unemployment, inequality continues to be the biggest stain on the development of our people. Whilst the percentage of people that experience hunger has decreased since the advent of democracy, it is still unacceptable that around half of all South Africans live in poverty and a quarter live below the food poverty line. The expanding provision of basic services to households has been one of the most important interventions by successive ANC governments since 1994 to improve the lives of all South Africans. According to Statistics SA, access to water and sanitation, electricity, housing, and other services like waste removal has increased steadily over the last 3 decades. Another significant intervention against poverty is the provision of social grants, which are the main source of income for about a quarter of households in our country. Just over 2.5 million people were receiving social grants in 1999. Today, over 18 million people are now receiving these social grants. The introduction of the Special Relief of Distress Grant during the pandemic meant that about half of all South African households received at least one grant. According to estimates by some researchers, without this expansion of social support in the past 2 years, poverty would have been 5% higher amongst the poorest households. In the long term, one of the most effective instruments to end poverty is education. Over the last 2 decades, important progress has been made in access to education in our country. To ensure every child gets a solid foundation for social and educational development, the ANC government has prioritized early childhood development, ECD. Through subsidy interventions, we have supported several ECD centers and practitioners to ensure that we link early childhood development to the formal school curriculum. And we have also successfully moved early childhood development from social development to basic education, so as to streamline the delivery of education to our children from a very early stage. According to Stats SA, there are around 1.6 million children in ECD facilities, but this only accounts for about a third of children around age 3 to 5, which means that there is a huge gap that needs to be closed before we can give all the children of our country a better and a good start in life. It is estimated that some 7 million children should be in the ECD center system. And I'll call upon this conference to discuss this matter because it is at that early stage where we begin the process of dealing with poverty by delivering a better education as our children are still young. South Africa has significantly high levels of enrollment in basic education. In 2019, 96% of 6-year-old children attended an education institution. This is a phenomenal achievement, which we should all recognize because not many countries are able to reach this level of access in education at a young age. But we should also be concerned about the dropout rate from school, which is unacceptably high, with the result that less than half of children who start school get to grade 12. We often find that many of our children or young people drop out at grade 9 and grade 10 before they get to grade 12. This is a matter that should concern us and which we should discuss at this conference. An important intervention to improve school attendance and alleviate poverty was the introduction of no-fee schools in poor communities. We have seen the results of our investment in education in the steady improvement in the overall matric pass rate since 1994. From the late 1990s, where the pass rate stood around 50%, now the matric pass rate last year was 76%, which is a great achievement from where we started. The 54th National Conference resolved to improve access to higher education through, amongst other interventions, the provision of free higher education for students from poor and working class backgrounds. As a consequence, funding by the National Students Finance Aid Scheme, NSFAS, for poor and working class students in universities and TVET colleges rose from 21 billion rand in 2018 to 38.6 billion rand in 2021, which is quite significant. But the total number of students funded increased from around 580,000 to 770,000 over the same period, which too is a significant improvement. The expansion of access to higher education is indeed a great achievement that will benefit the economy and the country for many years to come. Together with the work being done to strengthen basic education, the growth of post-school education will ignite the skills revolution that we have so often spoken about and that we must now embark on in a focused manner upon identifying the key skills that our economy needs and deploy young people to acquire those skills. To ensure that skills training is linked directly to the demand in the economy, we are pioneering a fundamentally different approach to skills development for unemployed young people. Another important intervention is reducing poverty and improving people's quality of life is the provision of quality health care, especially to the poor. Since the advent of democracy, starting with the provision of free health care to children under 5 years of age and pregnant women, the ANC government has made substantial progress in this respect. However, there is still significant inequality in access to health care, with our country still having two parallel healthcare systems, one for rich people and one for poor people. The National Health Insurance Bill, which is currently before Parliament, is meant to correct this state of affairs. This in itself gives effect to the 54th Conference resolution on ensuring that the NHI is implemented. The introduction of the National Health Insurance will enable every South African to receive appropriate, standardized, quality health care regardless of their ability to pay. Within 2 years of our 54th National Conference, the world was struck by the most destructive pandemic in more than a century. COVID-19 has cost more than 6.6 million lives globally and more than 102,000 COVID-related deaths in our country. Our response to the arrival of the virus in our country was swift and decisive. We employed a strategy that put the lives of our people and their livelihoods above everything else. In addition to the tragic loss of life and the huge strain that was placed on our health system, the pandemic devastated our economy, increased unemployment, and deepened poverty. While the economic effects of the pandemic were severe, the situation could have been far worse had it not been for the decisive and substantial intervention of our government, working together with our social partners. In May 2020, government put in place a massive social and economic relief package to provide cash directly to the poorest households, to provide wage support to workers, and to give various forms of relief to struggling businesses. A total of 18 million people, or close to 1/3 of our population, received additional grant payments through these relief measures that we embarked upon. More than 5.7 million workers received wage support through the special UIF scheme. Over 70 billion rand in tax relief was extended to businesses in distress. Around 13,000 businesses were helped through the loan guarantee scheme, and various forms of support and relief were provided to thousands of small medium enterprises. As part of this historic package, an additional 20 billion rand was allocated to the health response to the pandemic, and 20 billion was allocated to our municipalities to provide emergency relief in the form of water, food, and shelter to the homeless people in our country. Together with social partners, government established the Solidarity Fund, which raised 3.4 billion rand for South Africa's response to COVID-19 and health and humanitarian social consequences. Working with social partners, government administered more than 38 million doses of vaccines, reaching more than half of all adults and ensuring 66% of everyone over 50 years of age is fully vaccinated. This, comrades, was the largest public health intervention of its kind in the history of our country. What stands out from the COVID-19 experience is the extent of mobilization and organization by the people of South Africa through all social formations and in all communities. We saw trade unions, we saw businesses, we saw religious institutions, we saw our traditional leaders, we saw our sports leaders, all of them joining hands to enter the campaign against COVID-19. In previous national conferences, and especially at the 54th National Conference, it was decided that a state-owned pharmaceutical company should be established. With the advent of COVID-19, 2 companies in the pharmaceutical sector in which the state has a shareholding, BioVac and Ketlapela, have distinguished themselves in terms of capability and innovation. BioVac has now entered the vaccine manufacturing space with great effect. This year marks 25 years since our democratic constitution came into effect. The Freedom Charter, the lodestar of our movement, underpins the values and the norms of the country's constitution and serves as a guide for all our actions, all our programs and processes. The Constitution remains the foundation of our democratic order and the guarantor of the rights of all South Africans. We have done much to give effect to the rights contained in the Constitution, whether in the form of democratic labor laws or in the progressive provision of housing, water, sanitation, education, healthcare, and social grants to the poor and the vulnerable. However, the task of ensuring that all South Africans are equally able to exercise these rights is far from complete. This is evident in the high levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, the lack of access and assets to land, the weaknesses in the provision of basic services, including deficiencies in the quality of healthcare and education. We should resist the populist retort that seeks to lay the blame for lack of transformation and poor service delivery on the constitutional protections and safeguards that ultimately protects us and future generations. We should rather develop and implement the policies that will manifest the promise of a transformative constitution that we have. Improving our performance stands at the center of what we have described as the second phase of transition to a national democratic society. Indeed, as argued in the Strategy and Tactics document, this phase should be characterized by decisive action to effect thoroughgoing economic transformation and democratic consolidation. The African National Congress was formed to unite South Africans for the complete liberation of our country from all forms of discrimination and national oppression. The democratic breakthrough of 1994, the ready acceptance by South Africans across race, class, and other divisions of a common nationhood, and the almost universal endorsement of our democratic constitution provide an emphatic response to the deep divisions that defined colonialism and apartheid. Yet, despite this clear progress, many of the divisions of the past still remain. They remain as a colonial and apartheid past that continues to cast a shadow on the efforts we seek to make as we build a national democratic society. At their most obvious, these divisions are evident in the material conditions under which South Africans live. Access to land, wealth, skills, basic services and opportunities very much still reflects the racial, gender and spatial inequality of the past. Unless these material divides are breached and eliminated, the goal of social cohesion and national unity will forever remain elusive. Racist and sexist attitudes persist in parts of society, alongside ethnic chauvinism, homophobia, and other forms of intolerance. We see these attitudes manifested in acts of blatant racism, violence against women, and discrimination against the LGBTIQ+ people and persons with disabilities. The persistence of these material divisions, attitudes and practices strikes at the core of our efforts to build a national democratic society. There is a subtle erosion of our principles of non-racialism, especially in practice. The non-racial character of the African National Congress needs to be reflected both in its policies and in the composition of its membership, as well as in the composition of its leadership, its electoral support as well, and its mobilization programs. Women need to participate fully and equally within all structures of the ANC and all South Africans, regardless of race, gender, class, language, culture, sexual orientation, or disability, must find a home in the African National Congress. We must reaffirm our stance that women should also participate fully in all our structures, especially in leadership positions. And this conference gives us that opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to this principle as well. One of the defining features of the democratic breakthrough of 1994 is that it gave effect to the call of the Freedom Charter that no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people. Since then, the country has held regular, free, fair, and peaceful elections at national, provincial, and local level. The most recent national and provincial elections took place in May of 2019, providing a firm mandate for the 6th democratic administration. The ANC received a majority of votes at national level and in all provinces except the Western Cape. The 2019 election is testament to the vitality and durability of our democracy and also abiding support of the people of South Africa for the African National Congress. However, voter turnout in these elections was markedly lower than in previous elections. Voter turnout declined from 73% in 2014 to 66% in 2019. While there may be reasons for the low voter turnout that are specific to these elections, there has been a discernible decline in voter participation over the course of several elections. Comrades, this presents a significant challenge to the development of our democracy and ultimately to the legitimacy of our elected institutions. This requires that the ANC, working together with the Alliance and other social formations, should undertake a deliberate program to improve our voter participation, particularly amongst young people. One of the important features in the operation of our democracy is the participation of members of the public in the development of government policies and the passage of laws. Our conception of democracy, of people's power, that is, has always extended beyond the narrow formalities of elections at regular intervals. To enhance this, the executive has revived the program of Izimbizo, which provides platforms for communities to engage with the President, ministers, the Deputy President, premiers, MECs, and local councillors. Economic transformation stands at the center of the second phase of transition and is necessary to give effect to the aims and objectives of the ANC. This means that the structure, the ownership, control and participation in our economy needs to be radically transformed to serve the interests of the people of South Africa. As set out in the Freedom Charter, our Lodestar document, all South Africans must share in the country's wealth. Economic transformation requires an economy that is growing and creating employment. It requires an economy in which new businesses are able to emerge and flourish, where black people, the women of South Africa, are able to advance at all levels and in all areas of the economy, and where township and rural economies are able to grow. It is an economy in which the features of apartheid, inequality, and exclusion are steadily removed and replaced by an economy that involves, empowers, and benefits all South Africans. In the 28 years since the advent of democracy, the country's economy has grown, it has created employment and provided opportunities to the black people in our country and to women that they were previously denied. However, for much of the decade leading to the 54th conference, the economy was characterized by low growth and higher levels of unemployment. The 54th conference therefore correctly adopted several important resolutions to reignite growth, to accelerate land redistribution, to reduce economic concentration, to increase localization and beneficiation, and support the development of small businesses and cooperatives. These resolutions formed the basis of the ANC's 2019 election manifesto and the medium-term strategic framework of the 6th administration. Our conference resolutions continue to guide the economic program of our government. The progress that we are making in addressing our economic challenges has to be seen against the backdrop of the global economic, situation and our macroeconomic policies. The fiscal constraints that we have had to deal with have also played an important role in the trajectory of our economy. The role of the government in the economy extends beyond just the budget, in that the government continues to play a key role in supporting the economy in many other ways. What should be noted is that more than 50% of our budget goes towards the social wage to support the livelihoods of our people. This does not obtain in many other countries around the world. The positive momentum of economic reform program was severely disrupted by the measures we had to take to address the pandemic. As the pandemic subsided, the Russia-Ukraine conflict disrupted global logistics and supply chains, causing severe shortages of critical commodities such as oil, grain, and amongst other things. The unrest that we went through also contributed to our economic woes. Inflation has soared, necessitating the tightening of monetary policy with all the negative consequences for the economy and on our people. The sound macroeconomic reform agenda that we are diligently executing, as well as the strengthening of SARS and the gains that it is making in tax revenue, occasioned by positive terms of trade, should give us confidence that our fiscal position is set to return to a firmer footing over the medium term. The macroeconomic stability we have fostered has given us a strong platform to enable our economy to grow going forward. One of the most significant labor market developments during this term of 5 years was the introduction on the 1st of January 2019 of a national minimum wage for the very first time in the history of our country, guaranteeing a minimum floor below which no worker may be paid in South Africa. Not only did this give effect to a resolution of the 54th National Conference, but it realized a demand that was made by our forebears in the Freedom Charter more than 60 years ago. As part of the effort to reignite economic growth, in May 2018, government launched an investment drive that sought to raise 1.2 trillion rand in new investment in our country. This was in furtherance of the 54th National Conference resolution that said we need to unite social partners, including government, labor, business, and communities in an investment pact. To date, around 1.14 trillion rand in investment commitments has been raised, and more than 300 billion rand has already been invested in a number of tangible projects around our country. The investment drive has been accompanied by a range of reforms that we have had to embark upon to make our economy more competitive, more efficient, and more capable of growth. These reforms have focused on network industries, of energy, telecommunications, water, railways, and ports. The insecurity of electricity supply continues to be one of the greatest impediments and risks to economic recovery in our country. Poor policy decisions in the past, together with inadequate maintenance, mismanagement, state capture, and widespread corruption, have left our electricity system in a state of real disrepair. The effects of load shedding are felt every day by households, businesses, schools, hospitals, government offices, and indeed by our people generally. Load shedding severely constrains economic growth as well as transformation. It constrains job creation, poverty alleviation, and development. It represents a real threat to the advancement of the National Democratic Revolution. Since the 54th National Conference, we have undertaken several far-reaching measures to completely transform the country's energy sector. Apart from the immediate steps to stop state capture at ESCOM and rebuild the utility, government has made significant policy changes to enable more competitive, reliable, cost-effective, and sustainable electricity generation. An important part of the work to reverse the effects of state capture is the recovery of funds that were paid illegally or improperly to a number of companies. To date, nearly 3 billion rand has been recovered by ESCOM alone, and a further 5 billion rand is being claimed in various court processes. The process to restructure ESCOM into 3 separate state-owned entities responsible for generation, transmission, and distribution is at an advanced stage, creating the conditions for greater financial and operational efficiency. This in itself will allow more diversity in the generation of electricity, reducing the risk of reliance on a single generator. While there may be diverse electricity generators and distributors, transmission must remain under the control of the people as a state-owned entity, as it is a national security matter. The revitalization of the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program has brought additional wind and solar power onto the grid, and significantly more generating capacity is due to come online in the next 2 rounds of the program. We expect more than 9,000 megawatts of new embedded generation capacity in the near future. This is taking place alongside concerted efforts to improve the performance of ESCOM's existing power plants. Whilst we are addressing and attending to the improvement of existing power plants, the procurement of emergency power is an option that has to be followed up with greater focus. We had started with the process of procuring emergency power, but various interventions were made to stall this. A number of countries around the world who have run into difficulties of energy generation have resorted to emergency power as they build up their own internal capacity. This too is an option that has to be focused on as we move forward, because if we do not do that, load shedding will remain with us for much longer. Critical maintenance and resources have been prioritized for the 6 power stations that contribute the most to breakdowns. Eskom is also recruiting skilled personnel, including senior former plant managers and engineers from the private sector. A special law enforcement team has been set up within the South African Police Service to tackle sabotage, theft and corruption that continues at Eskom. But the efforts that we are embarking upon are going to deal with those who continue to sabotage our electricity generation and who continue to participate in corrupt activities at Eskom. These and other measures will steadily reduce the frequency and severity of load shedding and ultimately end it. In fulfillment of the national conference that we held in 2017 resolution on firm action that we need to take to improve governance and performance of state-owned enterprises, steps were taken immediately after a national conference to appoint new leadership with the requisite skills and experience at strategic SOEs like Eskom, Transnet and Genel. A presidential state-owned enterprise council was established to assist with the stabilization of those critical SOEs and advise on new ownership and shareholder management model that we need to put in place. The functioning and operational performance of SOEs remain a significant challenge. Several are struggling with significant debt, underinvestment in infrastructure, as well as the effects of state capture and the shortage of skills. We see the impact of these challenges in a company like Transnet. A significant constraint on economic growth is the poor state of much of our railroad and port infrastructure. Although we have extensive transport and logistics networks, a lack of proper maintenance, criminal damage, and state capture have meant that these networks have been performing far below their potential. Various reforms have been initiated to address this situation. The lack of financial capacity for extensive investment on the part of Transnet, particularly in our ports, has resulted in the need to attract much-needed investment into our country's critical economic infrastructure, and so that we are able to promote greater efficiency and competitiveness. These reforms will help to revitalize. They will also help to reposition our SOEs so that they are able to fulfill their developmental mandates. Important reforms have also taken place in telecommunications, an industry that is vital to South Africa's development and its participation in the fourth industrial revolution. Progress in this regard includes the long overdue transformation of broadband spectrum, which will reduce the cost of data and improve access in underserviced areas, particularly our rural areas. These and other measures have been necessary to take. The migration from analog to digital broadcasting, which has begun in several parts of our country, is a crucial step in freeing up spectrum for broadband. It is a priority to now complete this process. One of the most critical drivers of future growth in an economy is investment in infrastructure. That is why we are taking several measures to substantially increase investment in infrastructure. One of the challenges has been to build infrastructure project preparation capacity in order to get infrastructure projects implemented. That capacity is now being put in place, both at national as well as at provincial level. To date, 34 out of 50 strategic infrastructure projects are in implementation stages in areas such as social housing, bulk water supply, road building, rural bridges, and student accommodation. The purpose of all these economic reforms and initiatives, as well as investment initiatives, is to create more employment for our people. Currently, around 11 million South Africans are without work. Such high levels of unemployment undermine our efforts to reduce poverty, they threaten social stability, and they prevent our economy from realizing its full potential. Unemployment, particularly among young people, is the country's greatest challenge and its most urgent task. This situation was made much worse by COVID-19, which led to the loss of around 2 million jobs within a space of a few months in 2020 and 2021. Unemployment in South Africa is a structural problem, reflecting the legacy of apartheid colonialism. Productive activity is concentrated in a few firms in each industry, allowing little room for the growth of small businesses and new entrants. Most growth sectors are not sufficiently labor-intensive, and there is a mismatch between the skills we have and the skills that our economy needs. Excessive regulation and inefficient network industries increase the cost of doing business and, importantly, the cost of hiring people. An important focus of the last 5 years has been on encouraging the emergence of small and medium enterprises, cooperatives, small businesses, as well as rural, but also township businesses. Undermining all our economic transformation efforts is the advancement of the economic position of Black people and women South Africans. That is why we introduced broad-based Black economic empowerment, affirmative action, preferential procurement, and other transformation policies to address the imbalances created by years of apartheid rule. We must resist at all the calls to abandon our transformative economic policies or to defer the task of broad-based Black economic empowerment. Now more than ever, we need to undertake the task of empowerment with greater intensity and purpose. The Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, which was adopted in October of 2020, set out to improve conditions for the revival of our economy post-COVID. Recognizing that it would take time for the labor market to recover in the wake of the pandemic, government launched an employment stimulus program to provide public and social employment opportunities. It also supported livelihoods of people in sectors particularly badly affected by the pandemic, such as the creative industry, the small-scale farmers, and the ECD practitioners, as I said earlier. One of our tasks is to ensure that the people who graduate from these programs that we have embarked upon find opportunities elsewhere in the economy for employment and income generation. We have set up an online platform to provide pathways, particularly for young people, to job opportunities to learn and to start their own youth enterprises. To date, over 3 million young people have registered on this platform, and more than 900,000 young people have been placed in earning opportunities. The economy is showing signs of recovery. The latest GDP figures show that the size of the economy has surpassed the pre-pandemic levels. Employment statistics indicate that nearly 1.5 million new jobs have been created in the last year, although we have still not reached or recovered all the jobs that were lost during pandemic. As I said, we lost some 2 million jobs. These statistics offer tentative hope of a more sustained recovery. The task of this 55th conference is to agree on the necessary measures that we need to take to ensure not only that the economy recovers faster, but that we create more employment, but that we also improve the lives of South Africans, as I said earlier, particularly workers and the poor in our country. It is our responsibility to ensure that the economy does not simply return to where it was before the pandemic, but that it is more inclusive, more diverse, and that it is better able to provide employment and economic opportunity to the millions of people who remain marginalized. An essential part of a more inclusive economy is greater access to land for all those who work it and who need it. The acceleration of land redistribution as part of a comprehensive land reform program was one of the emphatic resolutions of the 54th National Conference. In particular, conference resolved as follows: we must pursue with greater determination the program of land reform and rural development as part of the program of radical socio-economic transformation. We also said expropriation of land without compensation should be among the key mechanisms available to government to give effect to land reform and redistribution. In determining the mechanisms of implementation, we continued. We must ensure that we do not undermine future investment in the economy or damage agricultural production and food security, the 54th conference said. Furthermore, our interventions must not cause harm to other sectors of the economy. That is what we resolved in 2017. As the 54th conference recognized, the pace of land reform has been too slow to meet the needs of the majority citizens who remain landless. Since the advent of democracy, government has transferred over 4 million hectares of land through restitution and over 5 million hectares through redistribution, accounting for nearly 11% of commercial farmland. However, this, comrade, is far below the initial target that we set of 30% by 2014. Now, despite the setback of our efforts to amend Section 25 of the Constitution in our Parliament, we continue to pursue all available options, including through legislation like the expropriation bill, to implement our 54th National Conference resolution on land redistribution without compensation. There are a number of instruments that we will use to drive meaningful land reform, not only to correct a historical injustice, but to also use our land more effectively for economic growth and transformation. The ownership of land and the transfer thereof in rural areas under the control of our traditional leaders is being addressed with their full participation as we speak. The Deputy President has been leading efforts in this regard, and progress is being made. Alongside the redistribution of land, we have prioritized agriculture and agro-processing as significant areas of potential growth and job creation. This includes support for emerging commercial farmers as well as small-scale farmers. The impact of the input vouchers that were provided to around 140,000 small-scale farmers to buy seeds, fertilizer, and equipment as part of the presidential employment stimulus shows the great potential for such targeted support that we can give to our farmers. As we observed at our 6th National Policy Conference that we held this year, there is no greater crisis facing our country, our continent, and the world than climate change. The world needs to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions if we are to prevent catastrophic destruction and widespread suffering. We are already seeing the effects of climate change. You just need to look at the devastating floods that our country is now subjected to on the eastern seaboard of our country, on the side of KZN and the Eastern Cape, as well as internal provinces such as Gauteng and Northwest are suffering from floods that we've never seen before. And this is the result of climate change. We are now experiencing long-term droughts on the western side of our country for much longer periods than we have. Now, in response to all this, as many other countries in the world are having to do so, we have crafted a just transition framework which will guide our country as we traverse through to low carbon climate devastation, and where we are able to also find ways of building an inclusive society and economy as we traverse this path. We do need to reduce emissions not only for the sake of the health of our people or the economic well-being and the security of our people, but to ensure that our manufactured products and services remain competitive in a changing global economy. Now, a number of countries that are buying our products are beginning to ask how those products are made. They're beginning to ask about the energy composition that results in the products that we are making. And those countries in the future are going to be wanting to impose certain restrictions. And it is for that reason that we need to embark on our own transition. And we do need to embark on an energy transition that is going to make our products competitive. We have consistently maintained that this transition away from fossil fuels needs to be an inclusive and just transition. It needs to protect the interests of those workers, those businesses, and communities that would otherwise be adversely affected by the gradual shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. For example, new jobs and opportunities need to be created for workers in old power stations that are being decommissioned because they have reached the end of their lives. Like, for instance, one of our power stations, Komati, has reached the end of its life, and we've got to recalibrate it to be a power station that will now be aligned with the direction that we want to move in. We also need to look at how, as our coal mines run out of coal, how we are going to address that challenge, as many other countries are already beginning to do so. We need to skill, upskill, and reskill workers who will be affected to take up positions in new industries. The good and fortunate thing for us is that unions within our COSATU federations have already started this conversation, and indeed the federation itself has already come to grips with the exigencies of climate change. Now, affected communities need to benefit from the building of new renewable energy plants and new industries. And I can say opportunities that are going to be yielded as we move to new forms of energy are going to benefit our economy. For instance, the hydrogen economy is an economy that is beckoning, that is calling us. The Northern Cape is going to be a great beneficiary, as indeed a number of other provinces in this regard. Now, there are a number of misconceptions about the just energy. For example, there is no intention to close all South Africa's coal-powered stations or mines. In terms of the integrated resource plan that we agreed on in 2019, several coal-power stations are due to be decommissioned between now and 2030. Several newer coal-fired power stations, including Medupi and Kusile, will remain in operation for some time to come because we've just built these power stations. So, South Africa's future mix of energy resources is outlined very clearly in the IRP that we released in 2019. It envisages a diversity of energy sources. Over time, the proportion of coal in the energy mix will, yes, go down, and the proportion of renewable energy will increase. As a matter of principle, the pace and the form of our just transition must be informed by our own national interest, by our developmental needs, and by the availability of our own resources. The transformation of the financial sector is a priority if we are to ensure that all South Africans have access to banking services and finance. Among our long-standing resolutions is the establishment of a state bank that would be able more effectively than commercial banks to service the poor in our country and advance our country's developmental needs. And it is for this reason that we need to pursue and finalize the corporatization, for instance, of the Post Bank to fulfill this function. The Post Bank is our bank, state-owned, which has a great network throughout the country, which is very much used by the poor in our country. In early 2019, the NEC held extensive discussions about how to implement the 54th National Conference resolution on the public ownership of the South African Reserve Bank. The NEC reaffirmed the need to address the historical anomaly of private shareholding in the bank and agreed that the bank should be fully owned by the people of South Africa. That was agreed. Now, the NEC also agreed that the manner and the pace at which this happens needs to take into account the significant financial implications and our country's current fiscal position. It also needs to ensure, as the conference stated, that is the 54th conference, that this process does not benefit private shareholder speculators who are looking to make a fortune at the expense of our country's people. That is what we need to remember. To give effect to the 54th National Conference resolution, to expand the mandate of the competition authorities to tackle high levels of concentration, government made significant amendments to the Competition Act. You will recall that at the 54th conference, we did discuss the issue of the high levels of competition, of concentration of ownership and control in our economy. Amongst other things, the amendments that have been made to the Competition Act enable a reduction in data prices following a market inquiry, action against companies that hiked prices during COVID, and increased employee ownership in some companies following measures. The 54th National Conference recognized the importance of state procurement as a lever for empowerment and industrial development. This has been achieved through the preferential procurement policy that advances people who have been disadvantaged by unfair discrimination while ensuring that public bodies contract for goods and services in a manner that is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. Government has also designated certain products for local procurement by public entities and government departments, mainly linked to infrastructure. This policy has helped to expand local manufacturing, attracting investment, generating jobs, and improving the country's skill base. This is part of a broader localization effort, which involves an accord at NEDLEC to localize up to 200 billion of additional production over a 5-year period. When we came up with the policy of localization, many people thought we were mad, that the South African economy could not successfully localize. Having adopted this policy, we are seeing more and more localization happening, and it is now becoming the norm. And we must continue to insist that localization must be the order of the day, because that is going to lead to job creation in South Africa. To guide South Africa's investment in the digital economy, government established the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Commission made several recommendations to enable the country to benefit from rapid technological change, ranging from developing appropriate skills to encouraging advancing manufacturing capabilities to promoting innovation. In line with the 54th Conference resolution, government has prioritized the task of building a capable state. Through legislative changes for local government and the production, or rather the introduction of a framework for the professionalization of the public sector across all spheres, steps are now being taken to ensure that public servants possess the necessary skills, they possess the necessary expertise and experience to be able to serve the people of South Africa. Local government is vital to the developmental role of our state. This is the sphere of government that is closest to the people and where service delivery and economic activity happens. It is therefore a great concern that the reports from the Auditor General and the National Treasury and the State of Local Government reports point to the inefficiency, the maladministration, the lack of financial controls and poor governance in many municipalities. There has been an intensive focus on work to improve governance, financial management and service provision in municipalities. In several instances, national and provincial government have had to take over the running of a number of municipalities to put remedial measures in place. As the ANC, in preparation for local government elections, we involved community members in the candidate selection process so that ANC candidates had the support and the confidence of communities that they were expected to serve. We need to examine whether this approach to candidate selection has worked as well as we had expected. Because in certain quarters, we have found that those people who were chosen immediately turn their backs on the African National Congress, become independent, and they pursue their own interests. We introduced a new policy that candidates for mayors and other key positions in ANC-led municipalities need to undergo a thorough vetting and interview process before being appointed. One of the most important innovations of the last 5 years is the introduction of the district development model. This aims to produce integrated district plans in line with the vision of one district, one plan, one budget, one approach. The aim is to involve citizens directly in planning and driving development in their own communities. We all know that crime and violence have become increasingly greater problems in our country. Communities live in fear, worried about gangsterism, armed robberies, rape and murder. Women and children are particularly vulnerable to the violence perpetrated against them by men. The economy is being held back by damage to infrastructure, by extortion of construction sites, corruption, and the high cost of securing businesses and insuring assets. Since the 54th National Conference, we have prioritized building capacity within our law enforcement system. It has taken a little bit more time than it needed to, but we have done much to restore the capabilities and the credibility of the National Prosecuting Authority the South African Police Service, the Hawks, and the State Security Agency. We are recruiting significant numbers of new police personnel, strengthening the public order police unit, and working to revitalize community policing forum. I had the privilege, together with Minister Tere and our Deputy Minister of South African Police, Comrade Matale, to oversee the passing out parade of thousands of newly recruited police, almost 12,000 of them. They were a wonderful sight. We will not allow gangs and extortionists to damage our public infrastructure or extort money for businesses. The South African Police has established multidisciplinary units to address crimes of economic sabotage and extortion at construction sites by so-called business forums. We have described the violence committed by men against women and children as a pandemic, which is having a devastating effect on our communities and society. We must work together to address the drivers of gender-based violence in our communities, including patriarchal attitudes and practices amongst men. As men, we should demonstrate our intolerance of sexism, of patriarchy, and gender-based violence in how we treat our partners, our colleagues, our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters. The public violence and destruction that took place in July of 2021 had a great impact on South Africans' sense of security and stability. In the wake of the unrest, we established an expert panel that was led by Dr. Sandy Africa to examine the state's response to the violence, which found glaring deficiencies in several areas of our intelligence, security, and police capabilities. The recommendations of the panel are now being implemented. It would not be correct, as some have done, to characterize the unrest as a manifestation of factionalism within the ANC. This was clearly an act of counter-revolution to destabilize our democracy and to weaken the elected government. In addition to strengthening the state's ability to respond, the ANC needs to undertake a political program to prevent a recurrence of these events and the consequent destabilization of the national democratic revolution. One of the aims and objectives of the ANC is to advance and to support the cause of women's emancipation. We have made significant advances. It is largely thanks to the ANC's policies that 46% of all National Assembly members are women. For the first time, half of all cabinet ministers at national level are women. And even at provincial level, we continue to insist that at the very least 50% must be women in the provincial executives. And in some cases, there are even more women than men on those provincial executive councils. Out of 256 judges on our bench, 114 are women, and nearly half of all magistrates are women as well. Currently, 62% of the entire public service is female, and 44% of senior managers are filled by women. Now, comrades, we still have a long way to go to achieve equality in representation across all institutions in our society. Most notable amongst the challenges that impede the pursuit of gender equality is the economic participation or position of women. Much work is underway to promote economic empowerment of the women of our country. Government has set a target of 40% of public procurement for women-owned and managed businesses. Although progress towards this target is uneven between departments, we will get there because this is a must. We have to empower the women of our country. Now, these efforts are supported by training programs for women-owned businesses to qualify for government tender processes. There are also various initiatives to direct financial support to women-owned businesses and specific efforts to ensure access to women to own land, to housing, and to public employment opportunities as well. One of the clearest instructions from the 54th National Conference was to end state capture and to tackle corruption within our own ranks and within government and across society. Since then, we have taken decisive measures to end state capture, to restore state-owned enterprises, to rebuild public institutions, and to enable the criminal justice system to pursue perpetrators of corruption. We have seen important progress by the Hawks, by the NPA, by the Special Investigating Unit, by the Financial Intelligence Center, by SARS, and others who are tackling corruption. Guided by one of the resolutions of our last conference, we set up a very clear directive from this conference, from the last conference. We set up the Commission of Inquiry on State Capture, mandated by the 54th National Conference. The Commission has produced a detailed report, a disturbing report or account of the nature and extent of the mechanics of state capture. The Commission's report revealed extensive corruption, fraud and malfeasance within government departments, state-owned enterprises, provincial governments, security services, law enforcement agencies, and both local and international companies as well. As the ANC, we have consistently maintained that the Commission is a necessary part of the broader social effort to end all forms of state capture and corruption. We set up a process to engage with the findings and recommendations of the Commission as the ANC to determine how these can help to enhance the process of fundamental renewal and rebuilding within our own movement, as well as in government and broader society. From the deliberations and resolutions of this conference, we must ensure that we use the work of the State Capture Commission to consolidate and intensify the efforts against state capture and ensure that, yes, those responsible, whoever they are, wherever they are, that they should face the might of the law. But we must also say, we know that there will be resistance, but this must strengthen our resolve so that we can protect and advance the gains of our revolution. Turning to the state of the African continent, for the past 3 decades, Africa has seen great advances in democracy, instability, and peace. The formation of the African Union in 2002 here in South Africa and the adoption of the AU agenda for 2063 a decade later demonstrates the determination of African countries to forge a common future defined by peace, development, and continental integration. Progress towards the achievement of these goals has been mixed. The African Union set itself the objective of silencing the guns by 2020. While peace has been achieved in some areas, there is still war and conflict in several parts of Africa. There is general recognition that peace and stability will remain elusive if we do not address the relationship between security and development. This requires a multifaceted approach that includes improved governance, entrenched democratic norms, respect for human rights, and the political will to capacitate our institutions. We need to address the continued exclusion of women in economic, political, and social spheres on our continent, which renders them particularly vulnerable to violence and conflict, and which also undermines the contribution they could make to finding and sustaining peace. The continent still needs to find solutions to several other challenges, including the growing spread of terrorism and illicit financial flows, which siphon off resources that could be used to fund development. As the ANC, we have been working to strengthen our relations with other liberation movements, and we are proud to see that a number of them are represented here, right from Polisario, right through to Angola, to Zimbabwe, to Mozambique, Botswana. They are here, and we are very pleased. One of the most significant areas of progress in the implementation of Agenda 2063 was the coming into effect of the African Continental Free Trade Area in January last year. The AfCFTA will boost intra-African trade, promote industrialization without any doubt. It will also promote competitiveness of our products, and it will contribute to job creation and facilitate Africa's meaningful integration into the global economy. And in this regard, South Africa stands a really good chance and opportunity, as we are the most industrialized country on the continent, but we are also seen as the gateway into Africa. Improving women's access to trade opportunities will not only facilitate economic freedom for women, but also expand the productive capacity of various countries on our continent. South Africa assumed the AU's chairship in February 2020, mere days before the first COVID outbreak. The continent's swift and decisive response demonstrated what is possible when African countries work together under the auspices of the African Union to confront a common crisis. Africa was able to mobilize vital medical supplies, vaccines, and funding on a continental basis. In the midst of vaccine hoarding by wealthier nations through the African Union and other structures, we were able to secure over 500 million COVID vaccines for the continent. African countries have worked together with international partners, especially with the WHO, to build the continent's vaccine manufacturing capacity and enhance its health security. And South Africa played a key role in advocating for the ability of the African continent to be able to have its own vaccine manufacturing capability. Now, despite many challenges that our continent faces, we remain confident about Africa's future. We are confident that it will continue to grow and thrive, and that it will become a new frontier of global production and development. This has to be Africa's century. Now, Africa has an abundance of nearly everything: natural resources, its people, as well as agricultural endowments, as well as a young, dynamic, rural and urban population. Now, this is a great benefit for our continent. Institutions of the African Union and regional bodies are playing a greater role in bringing countries together to face common challenges, and the AFCTA promises a new era of economic growth and development. This conference is taking place during rising geopolitical tensions, which are evident in a number of conflicts that are happening, especially the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The effects of these tensions include growing food, energy, and financial crises, which affect poorer countries the most. We reiterate our pronounced position and our call for a negotiated solution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and a call on all countries and the international bodies to create the conditions for dialogue to bring about a just and lasting peace in that part of the world. Our foreign policy is informed by the premise that multilateralism and respect for international law are key to achieving global political and economic stability. We therefore continue to uphold the enduring principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. The stalemate in Western Sahara continues, with Morocco's inflexible policies not abating despite the appointment of a new personal envoy of the United Nations Secretary General in September 2021. Terrorism is spreading on the continent, and there is a correlation between the situation in Libya and the growing threat from terrorist activities in the Sahel region. In the Middle East, the occupation of Palestine territories by Israel and its ongoing expansion of settlements and policies despite the United Nations Security Council resolutions condemning expansionist activities continues to fuel conflict. Israel continues to violate international law, the provisions of the UN Charter, and international humanitarian law. We continue to stand with the Cuban people as they stood with us in the struggle against apartheid, and as they continue to provide support for our development. We reiterate our gratitude to the people and the government of Cuba for providing South Africa with medical personnel and at the height of COVID-19 pandemic. And we call for the end of the isolation of Cuba and for the lifting of the embargo and other restrictions directed at that country. In many of our international interactions, we have drawn attention to the difficulties that Zimbabwe is experiencing as a result of the sanctions imposed by various countries on Zimbabwe. We reiterate our call on the international community to lift sanctions against Zimbabwe as called for by SADC and the African Union. And South Africa continues to play an important role in the international arena. We have used our membership of BRICS, the G20 and the non-aligned movement to advance the interests of the African continent and the global South. We remain active in SADC and organs of the African Union. We continue to contribute to peace efforts in Mozambique and the DRC as well. Recently, our country played an important role in facilitating peace in the war in Ethiopia. Our former Deputy President, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, played a key role alongside other former presidents of some various countries on the continent. And we applaud her for that role. Recent events, such as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, have in many ways exposed the inability of the UN Security Council to fulfill its mandate of maintaining international peace and security. The current configuration of the United Nations Security Council is simply outdated, and it's also unrepresentative, and it disadvantages developing economy countries. Currently, there's a summit that is taking place in the United States between various African countries and the United States. It was pleasing to hear an articulation in that summit supporting the call that we have always made, that Africa needs to be represented on the United Nations Security Council. The message is beginning to sink. In line with our conference resolutions, South Africa continues to advocate for the reforms that will address this issue. The 54th conference gave us a clear mandate to unite and to renew the African National Congress. In the last 5 years, we did much to pursue a strategy of unity, rejuvenation, and renewal. We reaffirm our conviction that the strength, unity, and coherence of the ANC is necessary for the advancement of the interests of the people of South Africa and for building a national democratic society. We therefore do not pursue this process of renewal of the ANC for its own sake. We pursue it because of its importance to the fulfillment of the ANC's historical vision. Throughout its long history, the ANC has pursued the achievement of unity with its own ranks and across society. We have been clear that unity must be based on principle and the observance of the revolutionary values of our movement. Our experience of recent years is that disunity does not arise from ideological, political, or strategic differences amongst us, but it arises from a contest over positions in the state and resources that are attached to them. That is what causes disunity amongst us. We need to acknowledge that despite our efforts over the last 5 years, we are not as united, we are not as cohesive or effective as we should be. Now, our disunity continues at the expense of the support that we should get from the people of South Africa. Because when our people see us disunited, they walk away from us. They only gravitate towards the ANC when they see that its leadership is united, its membership is united and cohesive, its leadership is not at each other's throats, its leadership does not continue to attack each other on public platforms. Now, some of the divisions that existed before the 54th National Conference continue within the organization. They also continue within the leadership core of the ANC. Members of the ANC often tell me of the ANC who are divided. But they also tell me that, President, it is you, the leadership, who cause divisions amongst us as members of the ANC. Now, as we anticipated, the actions we were mandated to take against corruption and state capture have at times caused friction amongst us. So the process of renewal of the ANC, comrades, was given a really good boost when the proposal of the ANC Veterans League was accepted by the NEC to set up a renewal commission, which will present its report during this conference. The ANC has never fought the struggle for liberation alone. It has at all material times sought to draw together those formations that align with its objectives and are committed to the pursuit of the NDR. We have long been grappling with the form of the alliance that it should take in the democratic era. Now, after the experience of nearly 3 decades of democracy, we have agreed on the need for the alliance to be reconfigured to ensure that it remains relevant and effective in pursuing the national democratic revolution under present conditions as well as into the future. This 55th conference must provide guidance on the reconfiguration of the alliance so that we may conclude this discussion. The renewal of the ANC itself will be incomplete without the renewal of our entire movement, including how we deal with the issue of the reconfiguration of the alliance, the core of the movement. Now, in doing so, comrades, we also maybe at this conference need to have the difficult conversation of how some of the discussions are happening in some of our alliance partners. In the SACP, for instance, there is a debate going on whether the SACP should on its own run for elections under its own ticket and compete with the African National Congress. So we must engage in that discussion. But I want us to engage in that type of discussion calmly and in a way that is driven by the politics of our movement and of the NDR. The matter of the reconfiguration of the alliance should be seen as leading to improving the alliance relations at national, provincial, regional, and local level. It is true that our alliance partners feel that at times they are not properly included, properly recognized in terms of their role when we as the ANC take a number of decisions. We need to come to grips with that and see how best the alliance continues to be solidified as we move forward. It can also be said that at the heart of this process of improving relations in the alliance lies the imperative to strengthen the alliance and build its capacity to achieve its historical mission to drive and complete our shared strategy, the National Democratic Revolution. As the ANC, we must recognize that there have been weaknesses. There have also been lapses and shortcomings in how we have managed this relationship and how we approached our common tasks and responsibilities. In recent times, we have observed tensions in the alliance. Some of these tensions arise from our inability to engage effectively and regularly on key issues, whilst others arise from the broader challenge of an ANC government that is, in effect, in an employer-employee relationship with a significant portion of COSATU members, where on one side we are an alliance partner, and on the one side the ANC-led government is an employer. Then the tensions from the one relationship then infect or affect the relations on the other side. This is a complexity that we must understand and resolve. The ANC recognizes the leadership role of the working class in social transformation and stands ready to work with COSATU and the party and all progressive formations to build working class unity. One of the tasks arising from the 54th National Conference was to rebuild the ANC's electoral support after a gradual decline over the course of more than a decade. According to our analysis of past trends, we managed to halt the decline in 2019 national and provincial elections. This was thanks to the hard work, effective campaigning, and a positive response to actions arising from the National Conference. Now, the 2021 local government elections were, however, a significant setback for the movement and the National Democratic Revolution. For the first time in history, in our democracy, our share of the national vote dropped below 50%. Another grave concern is a substantial decline in the proportion of young people who have registered to vote. In the 2019 elections, 41% of people aged 18 and 19 were registered. By 2021, that number had dropped and fallen to 9%. And unless this trend is reversed, fewer and fewer adults will be registered to vote, and the strength of our democracy will steadily decline. One of the tasks we have identified in successive January 8 statements is to build social compacts, and this is something that we continue to pursue because it is important that these compacts must be built. We need to address this issue even as we are building a number of compacts on a sectoral basis as we move ahead. We need to strengthen our branches, and our branches need to lead campaigns that make the lives of our people better. The Letsema campaign has become the flagship campaign in the African National Congress, and we must utilize it leading up to the 2024 elections. Our branches must put this campaign to good use, as it has proven that it has great capacity to reconnect our people with the ANC. Communities must see an ANC that is in touch with them, an ANC that is involved in the issues that affect them. The ANC needs to draw in people whose talents, expertise, and energy can support our objectives and programs. At times, there is a tendency to lock people out, to say certain people with certain skills need to be kept out of the ANC. As we move forward, we must bring everyone in. In other words, masibute zonke, all the people who can contribute. We need also to move forward, comrades, to make our branches stronger and stronger as we bring all these skills within the ANC. Now, this is a solitary moment for the ANC. Unless we act now with courage and honesty to redeem our organization, we will have betrayed the ANC's historical mission and failed our people. In a decade from now, the ANC will celebrate 120 years of existence. By that time, in 2032, our ambition for the country would be to have realized the goals that are set out in the National Development Plan. The Renewal Commission will be presenting a report to this conference, as I said, a report that will give us a draft vision 2032 and also a roadmap for our consideration. The 55th conference should envisage what the ANC of the future will be and should outline the actions that we need to take to make that future a reality. We must envisage and work towards an ANC that incorporates the best traditions, the best values and practices of our past while responding to the challenges of the circumstances of the present. We must be a movement that embraces the pioneering vision of our founders and the fighting spirit of the young lions of successive generations. We must be an organization that distinguishes itself by the quality, capability, and political consciousness of its cadres. The ANC must draw into its leadership ranks the best in our society, the most committed patriots who seek to serve the people without any expectation of reward. A member of the ANC must distinguish themselves by their humility, by their modesty, by their discipline, whether they are in meetings or outside of meetings. They must also distinguish themselves by their purpose, by their hard work, by their fortitude, and the confidence that they exude about being an ANC member, by their self-belief and selflessness, and by their activism in the community and their concern and love for the people and their welfare. That is what an ANC member should be. The leadership needs to reflect, and its membership, by the way, the diversity of South African society, ensuring the equal participation of women throughout its structures, as I said, and the bias towards the working class is a must. The ANC also needs to be a youthful organization that is in touch with the needs and aspirations of the new generation. But that youthfulness must serve as an attraction for young people outside the organization. We must be attractive to young people. We must be an organization that draws on the experience, wisdom, and energies of all generations of activists. Above all, the ANC must be the most effective instrument in the hands of our people. These are the hopes that we all share. But to get there, we must be prepared to work hard. We must ensure that our movement always remains the pillar that our people can lean on in difficult times. South Africa, like many other countries, has entered a period where strategic opportunities, risks, and challenges are concurrent, and uncertainties and unforeseen factors will continue to arise. Various occurrences and events may occur at any time. We must therefore be mindful of potential dangers. We must be prepared to deal with the worst-case scenarios and be ready to deal with various calamities, be they pandemics, be they economic recessions, be they security matters, or even dangerous weather occurrences. Now, on the journey ahead, we must firmly adhere to the principles that have stood us in good stead in the past, which are the unity and resilience of the people of South Africa, the unity and cohesion of our movement, and the adherence to our people-centered development path, particularly in dealing with poverty, inequality, and unemployment. We must have a strong sense of purpose and fortitude, and we must have a strong sense in our movement and our people. We must meet obstacles and difficulties head on and focus on addressing the triple challenges that we face. We must be able, comrades, to harness the indomitable fighting spirit of our forebears, like Albert Luthuli, Sefako Makgato, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Helen Joseph, Chris Hani, Albertina Sisulu, Lillian Goyi, Charlotte Maxeke, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Joe Slovo, Ahmed Kathrada, to address the difficulties and challenges on the road ahead so that we are able to open new horizons for the development of our people. And in all this, comrades, we dare not fail. We dare not also fail those who have come before us. So at this 55th conference, let us exercise discipline, let us exercise political consciousness, let us demonstrate that indeed we are worthy of being delegates of our people at this conference by sitting here and debating issues. Instead of shouting at each other, instead of howling at each other, let us be the members of the ANC. Amanda! Amanda! Yabo!
Kanjani? Kanibambe comrades. Kanibambe comrades. Kanibambe comrades. Kanibambe comrades. Kanibambe comrades. Swaren Yuano. Amelani. There are two few things that should happen. Anybody who picked up a missing cell phone of somebody, please bring it forward. That is a cell phone of and so forth. Number two, on the extreme left, there is a clinic there. If you feel feverish, little pain, please use it. Thirdly, we are going to adjourn the meeting. I will tell you why. When we adjourn, we are all requested to have dinner here, because that is where it is prepared, not in the hotels. So you are reminded that why should we adjourn now is because the next session is going to be a closed session. It includes adoption of credentials. Now, if there are few comrades who are still being registered in the registration center, we will be depriving them of the right to be delegates if we continue without them. Okay, comrades, does it deal with credentials must all be here. That's why we cannot just continue, even if we think that delegates present in the conference do